As a scientist and a clinician, I'm always asked, what does neuroscience have to do with movement? I like to adopt the mindset of a fellow neuroscientist, Dr. Daniel Walbert, and to say that I am a movement chauvinist. And I agree that the brain's most functional job is movement in our lives. Today, I'm going to share with you a little bit about my experiences and how they have shaped my outlook and perspective on science and how we move. 21 years ago, as a college freshman, I earned the opportunity to play college football at a nationally ranked college, university. During that time, I suffered a season-ending knee injury. And it happened at the tail end of the dog days of summer when we're at the end of two-a-days. It was an inter-squad scrimmage right before our first game of the season. And we were in a special teams drill, and my cleat was lodged into the ground while I was being tackled. Football is a sport of grit and a game of inches and also balance. And so as I fought for extra yards to project forward, the power of the tacklers overpowered me and put me on my back while my foot remained lodged in the ground. Now, as a result of that, I didn't think anything of it initially, and I tried to pop back up, and I reached out my hand to get up for my roommate and one of my good friends to this day, and he came over to get me, but then he ran away quickly in the other direction. And at that point, I realized that there was something wrong. At this point, I still didn't feel any pain, but when I looked down, I saw that my leg was mangled like a pretzel, and I was looking at the bottom of my cleat. And right before that, the final thought that went through my mind before I lost consciousness was, this is going to be interesting. After a few days in the hospital, and when I regained consciousness, I woke up with my mother and my father at my bedside. At that point, I could not see or feel my legs at all. And the first question that I asked my mother was, do I still have my leg? And so she really pacified me and didn't really answer the question directly. And then patted me and left the room, and I heard her sobbing in the hallway. And then the rest of my teammates and my siblings came to check on me in the room, and I continued to ask the same question, and no one answered me directly until the doctor came in. And he told me, he said, "Vaughn, you had a catastrophic knee injury, which does not classify, or is not classified as a athletic injury anymore. What you went through, or what you're going through, is unprecedented in this year, and we do not have a standard care protocol to treat you. And so we're flying in experts from all over to try to figure out what to do." And to explain a little bit about the injury, not going to spare the details, he told me that I suffered a total knee dislocation, which means I severed every ligament in my knee, including my major artery. and severed my peroneal nerve, which is the major nerve supply for the anterior compartment of my leg to pull my foot up. So effectively, my lower extremity, my distal lower extremity, was detached from my femur. Now, he had said that it would have been better if I fractured a bone and broke my leg, because the way my leg twisted, it effectively cut off the blood supply to the distal lower extremity, and I developed compartment syndrome, and which in turn resulted in the death of tissue. And at that time, he said, we're trained to cut your leg off at that point. And so your mother decided that you should not go without 2 legs. And as a result of that, we left it on. But you're not out of the woods yet. So this injury is not only an injury to your limb, but it is life-threatening. And so yes, you still have your leg, but as a result of that, we also had to take a vein out of one leg and put it in the other leg. So you still have a ways to go. And we had to remove quite a bit of muscle tissue in the distal lower extremity. And so what's left of your leg, we don't know, and we're just going to leave it open so that the air could feed the rest of the healthy tissue with hopes that it will return. So after hearing all of that, my next question was, so how many games am I going to miss? And he laughed and said, well, I wouldn't think about football if I were you anymore. You'd be lucky if you are able to stand on 2 legs unassisted by yourself when this is all said and done. Study the art of science. Study the science of art. Develop your senses, especially learn how to see and realize that everything connects to everything else. Leonardo da Vinci wrote this with the understanding that big systems are made up of small systems, especially as it relates to the human body and human movement. So I quickly learned this when I was discharged from the hospital, and understanding that I did not have full control over what I used to have full control over. I could not move my foot on command. I could not feel my foot or my leg. And I understood at that point that I would have to know my injury like the back of my hand and better than any other surgeon or doctor that treated me. Now, I must have drove my parents crazy at that time, because my chief thought was, I want to return to play football. So I want to play football. I want to get healthy to play football again. And so my motivation at that time to get better was simply because of that. Now, when I was discharged, they gave me an external fixator on my leg. And I was non-weight bearing for about 2 months. And an external fixator is pretty much metal rods that are drilled into your bone and flesh to reset your leg. So I had 3 in my thigh, 2 in my shin, and 2 in my foot. And once it was removed, I developed what they considered a plantar flexion contracture in my foot, where my foot was fixed in a downward position like this. So the external fixator did its job in terms of resetting my leg, but it caused another problem, which I'll take. And my tendons healed tightly and caused my foot to be in this position. And so I had my foot in this position with no nerve function to pull my foot up. So my balance and stability, or having to learn to walk again, was very difficult. I would equate it to if you can imagine having a flat shoe on one foot and wearing a high heel on the other. So trying to move forward through your day-to-day like that, and also learning how to, or relearning how to walk around that disability, around that physical deformity. What I know now as a scientist, balance, as it relates to an object from a physics point of view, is the state of steadiness on an object, and a point where net forces on that object equals 0. So that balance is a moment that is achieved, but it can change given a different force from any direction or a mechanical change. What holds the balance is stability. Stability is defined as the quality, state, or degree of being balanced, forces or moments that restore the original condition of equilibrium. And so stability is literally the quality of your balance. As it relates to my movement and walking, I understood that muscles provided stability in my joints. And my body had to make adjustments around my deformity. And I understood that from a mechanical standpoint, since my foot was up, one foot was up and the other was down, there was no way that I could restore equilibrium or balance to my function or gait. And so I walked around like that for 3 years until I elected to have one of my last surgeries, which was they cut and lengthened my Achilles tendon to put my foot on the ground, or my heel on the ground. So it would give me more stability, more balance with every step. And that was my idea. Even then, just trying to get back from football, I started to understand my limitations and how the systems in our bodies perform and work together for a goal. Eventually, I returned back to play football, got 2 years of college football under my belt, and I was able to somewhat restore function to my lower limb. Currently, my goal here is to define movement based on the knowledge and previous experience of my injury, apply science to determining or ascertain what variables are important to relate to one another so that we can fix problems. The Bayesian inference of movement is actually a probability equation that explains what our brain goes through, or the processes our brain takes to determine our move, or a movement, or a path of movement. So that algorithm is made up of previous experience, what it remembers you to do, external forces, and what you want to do. And then it creates a series of possibilities for your body to choose, and we ultimately choose one until we reach fatigue, and then we go to another. So essentially, our brain does that in an instant. And so, in my studies as a neuroscientist, I realized that why can't we recreate this? This information, knowing this information, or having this level of knowledge about how our systems work would aid in movement function for everyone, I think. And so this is a video of a gait analysis using the technology that I've developed to simply look at 3 different variables that correlate to one another. Another key difference that I would like to mention is that we have to be able to define the difference or know the difference as scientists between a covariance and a correlation. A covariance is a relationship between two variables without an interdependence on one another. A correlation is a relationship between variables with an interdependence on one another. So we know that muscle activity has a covariance with joint movement, right? We also know that plantar pressure, which we see on the right, on the far right, has a correlation, a strong correlation with muscle activity, right? And so with this science, we're able to understand deeply what principal components are important to produce movement and create correlations so that we can develop models for movement optimization. We feel that this deep learning technology will change the face of how we look at movement and treat our bodies. In terms of the technology that is used to do this, it is important to develop an ecosystem of sensory components that will collect information from populations of people so that we can take information like what I just displayed that is normally done in a biomechanics lab, but translate it to everyday people, you and I, that you can be able to define movement, optimize movement patterns, and set expectations for your body. Thank you.